The moment my fiancée laughed and quietly told me not to talk too much at her family dinner, something inside my chest tightened in a way I could not explain. It was not the words themselves that hurt. It was the way she said them, like a gentle warning. Like I was someone who might embarrass her. Like I was a problem she needed to manage before the evening even began. The house stood on a quiet street in Greenwich, Connecticut, glowing warmly behind tall hedges and perfectly trimmed maple trees. Vivian Aldridge had grown up here in a home that felt less like a house and more like a carefully designed stage for success. Her father was a corporate attorney whose name appeared on more legal plaques than I could count. Her mother chaired charity boards and hosted fundraisers that filled local magazines with photographs of polished smiles and champagne glasses. And tonight, for the first time since our engagement, I was sitting down with them for a formal family dinner. Vivian adjusted the sleeve of her ivory blouse while checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. Her expression was calm, elegant, practiced. Mine was the opposite. I had rehearsed introductions in my head for 2 days. I had read articles about conversation etiquette at formal dinners. I had even memorized the name of the vineyard printed on the wine bottle we brought as a gift. And yet the simple sentence she had just said stayed stuck in my mind. "Please don't talk too much." She noticed my silence. "Daniel," she said softly, turning toward me. Her voice carried the same smooth composure she used when speaking to clients at her investment firm. "I just want everything to go smoothly tonight." I nodded slowly. Daniel Whitaker. That was me, a technology consultant from Boston who had spent the last 6 years building a small but respectable cybersecurity firm. I was not poor. I was not uneducated. But compared to the Aldridge family's polished East Coast pedigree, I sometimes felt like a guest who had wandered into the wrong room. Vivian kissed my cheek before opening the dining room door. "Just be yourself," she added with a small smile. The contradiction of her words made my stomach tighten again. Inside the dining room, her parents were already seated. Jonathan Aldridge stood when we entered. Tall, composed, silver-haired in a way that looked intentional rather than aged. "Daniel," he said warmly while shaking my hand. "I've been looking forward to finally meeting you properly." Margot Aldridge offered a graceful smile from the table. "Vivian tells us you run your own company." Her tone was friendly, but her eyes studied me with quiet precision. The table was arranged like something out of a magazine spread. Crystal glasses caught the warm chandelier light. A perfectly roasted duck sat at the center beside dishes arranged with artistic care. I sat down, suddenly aware of every movement my hands made. Dinner began with polite conversation. Jonathan spoke about the expansion of his law firm's New York office. Margot described a charity gala she was organizing for a hospital foundation. Vivian nodded attentively, occasionally adding a comment that sounded both intelligent and effortless. I mostly listened, partly because I wanted to respect Vivian's earlier request, partly because I genuinely found their world fascinating. But silence can also create its own tension. Halfway through the main course, Jonathan turned toward me. "So, Daniel," he said casually, "how did you end up starting a cybersecurity firm?" For a moment, I hesitated. I remembered Vivian's quiet warning in the hallway. "Please don't talk too much." But Jonathan was looking directly at me, waiting for an answer. So I spoke. I explained how my interest in digital security began during college when I helped a small nonprofit recover from a ransomware attack. I described how that experience showed me how vulnerable even well-run organizations could be online. I told them how I slowly built my company by helping mid-sized firms protect their data and infrastructure. As I talked, I noticed Jonathan leaning forward slightly. He seemed genuinely interested. Margot asked a thoughtful question about how cyber attacks affect hospitals and public services. Even Vivian listened quietly while sipping her wine. For the first time that evening, the tension in my chest loosened. The conversation felt natural. But then something unexpected happened. Jonathan placed his fork down and said something that changed the atmosphere of the entire table. Our firm recently dealt with a massive data breach for one of our corporate clients. He paused thoughtfully. It was one of the most complicated cases we've handled in years. I nodded, recognizing the seriousness in his voice. Cybersecurity breaches could destroy companies overnight. "What happened?" I asked. He described how hackers had infiltrated the company's internal servers through a supplier system. The breach exposed sensitive legal documents that could have triggered major lawsuits. As he spoke, I realized something surprising. The attack method he described was one I had encountered before, and the vulnerability sounded painfully familiar. I hesitated before speaking again. Then I said carefully, "That type of breach usually happens when third-party vendors have outdated authentication protocols." Jonathan looked at me with sudden focus. That's exactly what our forensic team concluded. The conversation continued for several minutes, and for the first time since arriving, I felt like I truly belonged at the table. But when I glanced toward Vivian, her expression had changed. The polite smile she wore earlier was gone. Her lips were tight. Her eyes avoided mine. The room felt colder, and suddenly I understood something I had missed before. Vivian did not want me to embarrass her, but she also did not want me to outshine the image she had carefully constructed for her family. The realization sat quietly in my mind while dessert was served. Before we go further, pause for a moment and think about this. If you were in Daniel's position, would you hold back to keep the peace? Or would you continue speaking honestly even if it changed how others saw you? Drop your answer in the comments, because moments like this reveal more about relationships than grand gestures ever could. Dinner ended with polite conversation and gentle laughter, but the tension between Vivian and me followed us silently back to the car. The moment the door closed, she exhaled sharply. "You didn't have to explain everything like that," she said. Her voice was calm but tight. I turned toward her slowly. "Your father asked me a question." "That's not the point," she replied. Her eyes stayed on the windshield. "My parents can be very particular." The sentence hung in the air. I waited for her to continue, but she didn't. Instead, she simply started the car and drove toward the quiet Greenwich streets. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then she said something that shifted the entire balance of our relationship. "Daniel," she said softly, "you don't understand how things work with my family." I looked at her carefully. "Then help me understand." She hesitated before answering. "My parents expect a certain image." The word image echoed in my head. "And I don't fit that image?" I asked quietly. She didn't respond immediately, but her silence answered the question anyway. The realization settled slowly. This was not about dinner conversation. This was about identity, about status, about how two different worlds sometimes collide in quiet, uncomfortable ways. Weeks passed after that dinner. The engagement continued. Wedding plans moved forward, but something subtle had shifted between us. Conversations felt more cautious. Moments that once felt natural now carried unspoken tension. One evening in early spring, Vivian asked if we could talk. Her tone was gentle but serious. We sat on the balcony of her apartment, overlooking the quiet lights of Greenwich Harbor. "I've been thinking about our future," she began. Her words were careful, deliberate. "I love you," she said, "but marriage also means merging families." I waited. "And our families are very different." The sentence felt familiar, almost rehearsed. "Vivian," I said slowly, "are you asking me to change who I am?" Her eyes softened. "No." But then she added something that made the truth clearer than any argument ever could. "I'm asking whether our worlds can truly coexist." Another pause settled over the balcony, and in that quiet moment, the question became larger than either of us. Not about one dinner, not about one conversation, but about the subtle pressure that sometimes shapes relationships long before anyone notices. So let's ask the audience one more thing before the story closes. If you love someone deeply, but their world quietly asks you to become someone else, would you fight to fit in, or would you choose to protect the person you already are? Stories like Daniel and Vivian's rarely end with dramatic explosions. Most of the time, they end with quiet decisions. And sometimes those decisions change the course of two lives in ways no one can predict.